Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social democratic alternative for the politically homeless. Today, excitement, we are in our new studio, in our own office. We're also going to record the podcast in two halves. It'll be a game of two halves. So in this section, we're going to talk to Dickie Fletcher in our Bring Me Solutions section. And we're going to do Culture Club. And then separately, Sebastian and I will do the news section. So for those of you who want to listen to just one section, you can do that. And for those of you who want to listen to everything, you can do that too. So let's get ahead with Bring Me Solutions. So Bring Me Solutions, we have Dickie Fletcher, who's from Bollington and stood for the SDP in Macclesfield.
Macclesfield, that's right. Yeah, live in Bollington, but Macclesfield constituency, yeah.
Okay. And you work in the music industry in Manchester?
Yes, correct. I went to university in Manchester many years ago and then originally grew up in Sheffield, but went to university in Manchester and then stayed here, opened my own business in the music business. I've been here ever since, been doing that for 30 years now, maybe.
Wow, okay.
So a long time, lots of ups and downs, but still here, yeah.
So Macclesfield might be one of my favourite places in the country.
Oh, great.
Because I came to help you.
You did come and help me leaflet. That was excellent. Yeah, thank you.
And I was making videos as we were going around for the social media. And I kept saying, wow, Macclesfield gets better and better. Because to me, and this is somebody that's only spent one day in Macclesfield, but to me it represents what's good about the country.
Yeah.
You know, like the pretty architecture, sort of streets that feel fairly safe and quiet, and it feels like there's a bit of community. Yeah. Like it really has something going for it. Yeah. So I think we need more Macclesfields.
More Macclesfields, yeah. I mean, it is a nice place to live and to visit. I mean, it's got its own problems. There are areas with a lot of social deprivation, as everywhere. But it is a good community, and Bollington, where I live, is a bit more of a smaller community, and again, it's got that community vibe. I lived in Manchester for so many years, and it's great living in a vibrant city. But I'm at that age where it's nice to be near the countryside, and somewhere like say Macclesfield, you've got the best of both worlds because you've got that kind of cafe culture, but also you're in the foothills of the Peak District, and sheep and fields, and it's relaxing, and you can walk the dog and feel slight stress relief from being in the urban environment. So yeah, it's a great place to be.
And you're on the parish council in Bollington, right?
I'm on the it's called the town council. Town and parish council is the same thing. So yeah, but Bollington Town Council. I've been on the council for a year now. That's been a big eye opener on the kind of lowest rung of local government, but.
What's it taught you? And
it's meant to be not political. It's meant to be community-based, but there are plenty of people on the council who are political. There's what's a couple that are called double-hatted, where they're actually Labour councillors at the level of the main council as well. So there is quite a lot of politics that goes on. It's taught me that. What's it taught me? It's taught me that. Public sector is incredibly different to the private sector, and that getting things done compared to running a small business is very, very difficult, and that you have to learn. Actually, you have to learn, which is kind of antithetical to when you get involved with politics. You think it's all about winning an argument, but actually you have to learn in a lot of ways how to reach a consensus. You have to learn a bit of horse trading so that you don't completely burn bridges with people, because you might need their support later on. So at that level, it's interesting, and I think a lot of that gets lost in the political debate. But there is actually a lot more cooperation, especially at that level, between people of different political hues than you would think, because so much of it is community based, and there is often a common agenda to try and get something done. The main difference is there will be a jockeying for who takes credit for it. So that seems to be how politics works, in that people wish to be seen in the photograph at the end, less keen to maybe do the work to get the thing done. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's a fast learning curve.
What's the biggest controversial issue on the parish council? Sorry, town council.
Town council. Well, I've obviously been kind of 1 against 10 involved in the arguing against the 20 is plenty plan.
Speed limits.
Speed limits, yes. So before I joined the council was agreed to ask Cheshire East if they could, as the main authority, if they could be a champion for 20 is Plenty and get them to fund it throughout the town. To be fair, they've done a huge amount of work on it. Some people who live in the town who are quite expert in these things have put together a good report. But it's very ideologically driven, and also they hadn't done a proper cost-benefit analysis, which I tried to get them to do, where they factored in basically the extra time that you spend on the road and how that impacts small businesses, how that impacts people visiting elderly people, care times, that kind of thing. Some problems that have come up in Wales. And generally the adding friction to people's lives compared to the benefit of what you might save in terms of safety. And they hadn't done any of that analysis. So I fought against it. And although I lost the recent vote last month to proceed with it, interestingly enough, the town clerk sent an email last week that the Cheshire East Council had emailed back, this will cost you £130,000 to implement. So I think it will be kiboshed on the basis of putting the signs up is too expensive. So I will win that one in the end, but not from a vote point of view, just from a cost point of view.
Okay. And you've been with the SDP for a few years now, haven't you?
Yeah, a couple of years. I grew up in a very politically kind of discursive household in Sheffield. It was in the heart of the miners' strike. The people I was at school with discussed politics a lot. My parents were in academia. They discussed politics a lot. My great uncle was a Labour politician and a minister in Wilson government. So there was politics in the family. But you know, I went through various iterations of support. You know, I was very kind of anti-Thatcherite and supportive of Blair, but then completely became disillusioned with Blair, as many of us did, around the Iraq War and things like that. And lost focus in politics as I was building the business. But as we'll discuss later, with issues like free speech and the globalism, I was searching for a home. And when I found, and Rod Liddell, actually, following him and him talking about the SDP, is the person that keyed me into it. So I managed to pick up the new declaration, and I read that as the kind of, and it just, you know, resonated with me completely. You know, it was just like, wow, there are actually people that understand what I think about the problems, why we've got the problems, you know, all the problems that we came through from the financial crisis, the financialisation, the debt, the fact that we've decimated our industry and that, you know, made it a service economy. All those things really resonated with me, and also the importance of the nation as the limit of democracy. You know, I voted for Brexit, and I was very pilloried amongst my. I have 40-year friendships with people that grew up with school, and I'm the outlier in terms of they're very much all in that kind of neoliberal. They're all very successful. They're in the media. They're in business. They're architects. You know, most of them live down south, and I'm always the person who seems to spark their ire. So, you know, when they found out I voted for Brexit, I got it in the neck. So it's great to find, you know, some people actually agreed with me at last.
Nobody ever gets it in the neck for having voted Remain and being in a group of Brexiteers.
No, indeed.
So tell us about why you're particularly interested in free speech.
Well, I mean, as I say, it's one of the key things that I was getting more and more worried about, and also emotionally feeling more and more oppressed by the lack of ability to be able to talk about the subject without them being framed in a certain way, and without a moral judgment being applied to the person before even the arguments are made in the discussion. And this, you know, as I say, this is what I would call, when discussing this, the kind of soft problem of it, in that we've had a kind of creeping censorship amongst peer groups in the media, that either topics can't be discussed, or if they are discussed, they have to be framed in a certain way. So if you want to argue against immigration on the grounds of its economic detriment, that you can't do that, because you're automatically just bad. You're potentially racist. You're potentially far right. The whole gender ID stuff. the DEI stuff, and then of course the whole difficulty through COVID where there was restrictions on how much you could ask and question and all that. So it's a gradual process of being beaten down by the milieu around me and not being able to feel free to be able to discuss things without being made to feel morally bad, and then realizing that I was myself self-censoring and talking to other people who said that they self-censor, and understanding that this has very big consequences. So, and it's vital. And when I was reflecting on it last night, when I decided to talk about this, I was thinking back to the 90s and 80s when I was growing up and talking to my friends and we discussed political issues, and we were very much on the social justice end of things, and you know, we would send money to Amnesty International and things like that, and they were Amnesty International and bodies like that were often fighting free speech causes in places like the Eastern Bloc, behind the Iron Curtain, against communist regime, against the fascist regimes in South America, Pinochet, etc. like that. So I was imbued with the sense that free speech is absolutely vital for a democracy, and that it's a road that you do not want to travel down in censorship and blocking people's right to pretty much say what they want, up to the point, for me, I'm fairly absolutist on it, up to the point of the incitement of immediate violence, you know. And so I had that in me, but of course it's all got switched round in that the cause is now, if you claim it's an issue, you are now branded as somebody who's starting a culture war, and of course that's put on the far right, but actually, I mean, we can discuss how it's arisen. It's a bit of a mystery to me, but it's not a far right issue. It's just an issue of people being able to talk about issues in a political way without being judged in a moralistic way, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, one of the things that always strikes me is, I don't know if you've ever looked at anything like cognitive behavioural therapy, which kind of really encourages people not to look at things in very black and white terms. And yet it almost seems that as a society we're kind of bogged down in this kind of disease of everything being polarised, black and white. There's only one right answer. And anybody who thinks anything, even slightly deviating from that one right answer, is morally abject. It seems to be a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of an odd topic for a political party to talk about, but because actually, you know, in that split between God and Caesar, you know, when political parties are meant to deal with the Caesar element of things, so much of this is more the God element of things, and so much of it is moral judgments. And where does that come from? I mean, ironically, a lot of it is now being taken up by the legislation that was brought in by Blair. And of course, Blair famously, or Alistair Campbell famously, said we don't do God. You know, but it seems that what has been replaced in that kind of secular peak of we're just a political organisation, we're not going to get involved with your religious life, is actually, there's a vacuum there that has been filled by all these agendas, and so that political topics have become moral topics when they didn't need to be, because there's a moral vacuum. You know, who do we look to for moral guidance? I mean, you know, most people are secular in this country, and that's fine. I believe in a secular state and a pluralistic religious society that is where the state is secular. But therefore, who do you then look to for moral guidance? And it worries me that a lot of these problems are then made moral problems when they're often problems of economy, and then you create problems on top of those problems by making them moral, I think.
So some people would say you care about free speech, but that's just because you want to say outrageous things.
Yeah, I mean, they would say that. And I looked at some statistics as to see whether this is something that just Dickie Fletcher is worried about. And I think most people in the SDP probably agree with me that it's something to worry about. The recent surveys in 2021-22, there was a few of them done, and they suggested in the UK about 50% of the people are worried about curtailment of free speech. So that's quite a large amount of people. I would think now, given that's what's happened in the last few years, that might be higher. And in the field of academia, of course, where it's a real problem, 2024 survey by Times Higher Education found that 80% of UK academics believe that free speech had become more limited over the past decade. And there's been high-profile cases how people have been cancelled and careers stopped, often driven by a student agenda and an ideology. And that's a tragedy to me because, I grew up in an academic household. My father's an academic, my mother's a teacher, my godparents are academics. I remember sitting on the stairs listening to their heated debates about everything, politics, gender, feminism, history. And it was refreshing, and it gave me my basis for wanting to talk about things in life. And that has been closed down now, to the point where even history is being closed down, where certain people are not allowed to talk about history in a certain way. I mean, my father was a history professor. That to me is tragic, utterly tragic. So it is a real problem. I mean, the fact that we have the Free Speech Union, which was established 4 or 5 years ago by Toby Young, now Lord Young, attests to the fact. I mean, if somebody took a time machine back to the 90s and I was sat around with my friends and they said, oh, do you know in 20 years' time there's going to have to be a union to fight the government over free speech prosecutions, I would think they were bonkers, because, as I say, that would only be something that would be talked about in terms of oppressive regimes. But there is a necessity for the Free Speech Union. It's taken on over 3,000 cases in 5 years. It's across the political spectrum. I mean, there was a little spat on X the other day where Yasmin Alibi Brown sent a message saying, have you championed any cases of people who have been protesting the Palestinian cause? And Toby emailed back or wrote back on Twitter saying yes, he had, and that most of his cases are people who would profess to be left wing. They may be causes that are to do with gender critical stuff, but there is no political bias, even though he's a conservative minded peer. There's no political bias in it at all. It is merely on protecting people in a free speech environment. And of course, the problem is that one worries about the two-tier nature of policing and of justice in these situations. Because if somebody is middle class, like Alison Pearson gets doorstepped and during the problems last year, and she hasn't. I mean, it's distressing for her. I don't diminish that, but she has resources. She has people she knows who can help her. She could probably afford the legal fees. But somebody, from a poor estate in Leeds or Manchester who posts something on Facebook which is deemed to be inflammatory or something, they will have no resources, and that's why you need things like the Free Speech Union. But even there, it's a fairly unknown setup to people's of working class background, I would think. So you will end up getting, which we have got, I think, what I would consider miscarriages of justice, where working class people are treated in a different way to middle class people.
Yeah, a good example, I guess, is the guy from Stretford, just down the road here, who burnt the Quran in Manchester. Pleaded guilty. And the Free Speech Union did help him, even though I don't think he was a member. But those are the kind of people who, potentially would fall through the cracks. Yeah.
Can you explain why that's a free speech issue?
Burning the Quran.
Yeah.
Because in the UK we don't have a blasphemy law. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should be burning the Quran on every street corner, but I think he was burning the Quran for a very clear reason, to protest against another example, I think in Sweden or one of the Scandinavian countries, where somebody had been murdered for burning the Quran. So it was a politically conscious act. And he wasn't doing it just to upset people. He was doing it to make a political point. And on that basis, that is something that is allowed by UK legislation, and there's nothing to do with the police.
I suppose if you take out the content of that book, suddenly the issue is one that is not when you put somebody in prison.
Criminal, prosecutable. That's maybe a better word. And had he burnt the Bible, I would very much doubt whether the police would have got involved. As they shouldn't. I'm not saying they should do, but it's two-tierness of it, as Dickie says.
I mean, I think one of the things that, as I say, drew me to the SDP was the new declaration, which is I would recommend anybody gets a hold of a copy and reads it, because it has depth to it, it has integrity to it, and it outlines so many issues that we discuss in the SDP. And if I could, I'd just read the section on tolerance from that.
Go for it.
So it says, tolerance. We are concerned that our long-standing culture of tolerance has fallen from favour. There is now insufficient viewpoint diversity among the academic and cultural elites who presume to set our nation's course. A dangerous myth has emerged which holds that cultural questions are capable of rational arbitration, which must inevitably lead to a single liberal left view. Citizens holding a traditional, patriotic or religious outlook are often bullied and marginalised, stifling the open debate upon which a free and democratic society depends. From government to the police, from universities to schools, the politicisation of British institutions in the service of fashionable ideology is leading to a loss of faith in the pillars that uphold our society. We believe instead that a free and democratic society must hear different opinions in politeness and respect in order to thrive. We pledge to uphold the values of freedom of thought and speech which lie at the heart of British democracy. And I think we have reached a situation where we have privileged the people who find something intolerant over somebody's right to say what they would like to say. And I think that's part of a culture of allowing people not to be resilient. I mean, I looked up the etymology of tolerance before last night.
Gosh, you did a lot of research for this, didn't you? Well done.
Yeah, I knew I'd be under the cosh. And I think it comes from Latin tolerare, which means to bear and under pressure, And I think basically what has happened is certain people have been allowed to say, that is unbearable for me to hear. And I think that's wrong, because I think that's wrong for them as well as the person saying it, because then they become unresilient to life, because they will always come across things in life that are unbearable. But there is very little that is in fact unbearable, especially if you build up resilience to it. So we're indulging people and therefore cutting off. And so when you try to have a debate with somebody about immigration and they say, I don't want to talk to you about that because you're racist, that you're indulging their inability to bear that discussion, and that's not a tolerant society. They have to bear the friction, and in fact, I was thinking about this more. The fact that you're not allowed to discuss it and they're not allowed to bear it, and therefore it closes you off, that builds up the anger and resentment more than if you release it. I mean, they used to have. I don't know whether they still do. Young people, maybe they do. Rap battles, where you'd have yo mama this and yo mama that. And they would be ways of diffusing aggression, because you'd be insulting somebody and then you'd be coming back with a bigger insult. And you'd have your guys on this side and your guys on that side. And they are time-tested ways of diffusing conflict, because your mama, I mean, funnily enough, if we go on to talk about Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, saying anything about your mother is kind of the worst insult you could do. But actually, if you don't have those mechanisms to diffuse testosterone, to diffuse group identity conflicts, then you just build up anger and resentment. And that's what's happened in this society. So the people that aren't allowed to discuss things because they're called far right or racist, they don't stop thinking those things. They just go, wow, I'm now not even allowed to talk about it.
Yeah.
So that makes them more angry. There's no release for them. So the other reason I brought up the topic, other than that it was one of the ones that brought me to the party, was I think it's going to get worse and worse under this kind of government, because they don't realise it's not about people having wrong thought and we will just teach them to have right thought. It's about how do you allow people to discuss contentious issues, and how do you allow people to build up resilience so that they can bear being accused of something or being in a different position to somebody, and allow that to emerge without anger and without violence.
So your suggestion for the solution to these free speech issues is yo mama rap battles. That might be the best solution we've had on Bring Me Solutions.
That would be great. I don't know whether I'm going to get that past the party at the next conference, but
a lot of people, when we've had these Bring Me Solution sections, have suggested political solutions, changing laws, for the housing, maybe change planning law, etc.
Yeah.
It feels to me that this is one without a firm political solution, or that the political solution is not the be-all and end-all, because you look to a country like America where they have the First Amendment and they have a lot of these issues still.
Well,
free speech is sort of
I think
suppressed.
I think that what I've discussed is how I would frame the kind of soft problem, in that it's a cultural problem, and that we need to battle against it. And but then there is a hard problem which we've seen increasing, and we have in this country with the Labour government, in that they are using the legal framework to perpetuate the problem. And I would argue, and I would agree with Vance, his speech last week at the Munich conference, that we in Europe and in the UK, our free speech laws are not robust enough. And so, it's SDP policy, which I would agree with, is... So the Human Rights Act will be replaced by a new Bill of Rights, drawing upon the British tradition of liberty, free speech and free association, and incorporating established principles such as habeas corpus and the rule of law. And I think that's right. And I think there's a lot of pearl clutching when you say, we'll get rid of the Human Rights Act, we'll get rid of the EHCR. But actually, it's not robust enough. It doesn't protect people's free speech enough. And funnily enough, looking into this, Dominic Raab, before he was defenestrated out of the Home Office by the Civil Service, was working on a white paper which did exactly this. It was going to establish a Bill of Rights, leave the EHCR, and make free speech much more robust in that Bill of Rights. And then, funnily enough, he was out the door. So that's make no necessary connection there, but anyway, I mean, the difference between the robustness of the US version of free speech and the European one is quite stark. So in terms of the key differences in the scope of protection, the US places stronger emphasis on free speech, even in cases of hate speech or offensive content, while the EU, which includes the UK because we're bound by it, has broader restrictions on speech that could harm public order or individuals' rights. So unfortunately, what happens is the state will always just use the public order issue and say, well, we have deemed that what you said will cause a riot. Yeah. And it seems to me there are a lot of judges who will just go along with that. And that's not correct. That's not robust enough for me. That's not an act of imminent violence. You're not standing there asking people to light a match. You're making a comment on Facebook which may be ill-judged. You may have used language which was inappropriate, but to put somebody in prison for that, I think, is bonkers. The cultural emphasis differences. The US values the individual's right to speak freely without interference from government, often prioritising this right over other considerations. So it's about, in contrast, the EU's approach tends to focus on balancing free expression with other social values like preventing discrimination and maintaining social harmony. So it's really how much emphasis you place on the individual's right to free speech compared to the community harm. And I mean, I would argue that a lot of these things are areas where the state is overreaching. These issues used to be dealt with in the community, or in your family. If you went into a pub and started being racist or sexist or something, you'd probably get a smack in the mouth, or your own milieu would say, "Hang about, wind your neck in, stop being daft, and those things emerge out of your culture of decency and tolerance and the community, and most problems are solved on that level. But again, this goes back to, because we don't have necessarily a structured moral framework, and because we're a more atomized society, the state is now putting itself in that role, as it does in the health service, as it does in mental health. It's basically taken the role of the things that extended families used to do, that communities, that neighbours used to do. And I don't think it's qualified to do that,
I agree. So I think really you're suggesting that the solutions are kind of two-pronged. There's an almost top-down one, which is about government and thinking about having something like a right to free speech, but also bottom up in terms of people being more resilient.
Yep.
And people actually taking responsibility to step in if they need to.
Yeah. I think we have to take the grievance culture away. We can't let people say that is unbearable to me, so you can't say it. I just think that's unacceptable.
Great. That's a fantastic thing to finish on, I think. So thank you very much, Dickie, for bringing us some solutions on that tricky area. Culture Club.
Indeed. Yes.
Shall I start?
Yes, go for it. What have you got?
I wanted to talk about brass bands. And I think we could maybe even play a little snippet.
I just thought,
of the Black Dyke Band, who
fantastic.
I went to see the other week. People who, I'm sure some of our Yorkshire listeners and members will be thrilled that I, from the Red Rose County, I'm talking about a Yorkshire brass band. I just wanted to play a tiny little bit of them playing Nimrod. So Sebastian's going to press the right button. This is beautiful. I did listen to that this morning in the hope that, having listened to it this morning, I wouldn't cry. But I am struggling now. It is just so beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of music, isn't it?
So brass bands, obviously people will have a bit of a knowledge of them through Brassed Off, I think. That is the place people most...
A bit before your
mostly,
time, Seb?
Yeah, no idea what that is.
It's a film. You're not good on films, are you? So that's the list of things that I've told you to watch.
I've got a long list.
It's a long list.
It's actually a very SDP-themed film because it's about the the loss of coal mining communities and bringing people together through music and the problems that people face at those times.
Definitely.
So an SDP film night.
Yeah.
Oh, we should do that, definitely. Yeah. So I went to see them, not at a posh city centre venue, but actually in my local Salvation Army Citadel. And it was great because there were two halves to the concert. The first half, the Black Dyke Band just played on their own, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And then in the second part, the Salvation Army Band from my local church played with them.
Oh, wow.
This is the church that my mother-in-law attends weekly, and she says they're still on cloud nine from having had that experience of playing with a world-famous band. Yeah. So they're from near Bradford, and I think there is still a very much a tradition of brass bands in that area, as there is in Lancashire, actually. I know some people who play in brass bands, both in Sale, where I live, but also in places like Blackburn. And I'm just going to encourage people to go and see a brass band. The Black Dyke Band are playing a few concerts in the coming future, so just look at their website. I know they're going to be playing in Bolton, which is my hometown soon, and they are playing in the Yorkshire Brass Band Championships.
Oh, wow.
So I think that will be a fantastic one to go to.
Yeah, I mean, they're very dear to my heart because my mother's family was Salvation Army. My grandfather, who I never met, sadly, who died when my mum was 19, he was a band leader.
Wow.
So some of the music stuff that I got through is through that route. And my mum led some bands when she was teaching in Sheffield. She did some stuff where where she taught actually was the side of Sheffield, which was close to where the mining villages were, and she had a lot of children whose fathers were miners, and she led some bands as well. So I mean, it's always been in my house as a youngster. She would often put brass band music on, and it was in her blood as a Salvationist. So yeah, a good brass band is fantastic to listen to.
I did bring you a mouse map back from the concert, didn't I, Sebastian? Do you want to
I've
admit what you thought it was about?
Until you sent me that piece, I thought it was some sort of like heavy metal rock band. Because Hilary always says to me, I've just been at a gig this weekend, and I'm just picturing you there with like black face paint, like rocking out.
There's no mosh pit at the Black Dyke Mills band, is there?
There was no mosh pit in the Salvation Army Citadel.
No.
So, Dickie, did you bring something to Culture Club?
Well, I was really going to just talk about audio books and the value of audiobooks. I've discovered recently that, because time is so short for people, so I dived in myself on journeys in the car, instead of listening to music or relentless politics on the radio, decided to join audiobooks and start listening. I think what I found is that novels aren't great on audio, but I don't know. Some people might be able to do novels, but I find that reading a novel it's a very personal thing, and you create the characters more. Whereas biographies, history, anything like that on audiobooks, I find absolutely fantastic. So I've just done I did a one on the history of Christianity, which was fantastic. I did a one.
What was it called?
It's called The History of Christianity, I think.
Do you know who?
It's by the great Diarmaid MacCulloch, who's a historian.
Okay.
Yeah. Before that, it was Diarmaid MacCulloch, because before that I did his biography of Thomas Cromwell, which was fantastic. And now I'm listening to J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, which, again, is one of these people, if you mention, going back to previously, where people will shut off the conversation and the derangement syndrome will kick in and you'll be cast into the depths of far-right hell. But actually, his background is fascinating. I don't know whether you know much about it, but he came from a very poor background, lots of drug abuse, violence, neglect, all that kind of stuff. In fact, funnily enough, I knew a bit about it before, because one of these WhatsApp group messages I have with my friends from way back in school, all these people that think I'm a nutter, there was, I think Angela Rayner went to meet him last year sometime, and one of them commented, then imagine how that's going to go, and I just replied, I think they'll get on like a house on fire, because actually they come from very similar backgrounds. And so I think if you listen to audiobooks, it's a great way of learning more and getting into really challenge your depth of knowledge, and it's just a perfect use of time, because we're all time poor, and I would encourage anybody to listen to Vance's story, because it's fascinating.
So I'm not a particular fan of audiobooks, nor Kindle. I don't like the sort of modern technology.
No, I like a real book.
I like a real book.
Yeah,
but I think they do have, if they can reach new readers, that's brilliant. And I think you're right about non-fiction being much more accessible on audiobook. Where I have certain problems is when I hear arguments for people. I was watching a video of an author the other day who was saying, of course audiobooks are reading. And to me, there's a huge difference. And I think for that argument, you'd have to look at a book like Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, where he talks about the way that we consume information and the medium, how important the medium is. And so I do think there's still a huge, a really important place for real books and real reading, because I think it's a completely different activity. But I think audiobooks are great as well. And I really want to read Hillbilly Elegy.
Well, get it on an audiobook, smash it.
I'm going to massively disagree with you both.
Oh, okay, good. And it's a free speech podcast. Yeah.
I feel like, aren't we disagreeing with each other? I don't know what this take is going to be.
So I think on audiobooks, fiction works much better.
Oh, okay.
Because, with fiction, you don't have to listen to every word, whereas with a lot of non-fiction books, you really do need to think. And I've been reading Nigel Bigger's book on colonialism. Reading it on audiobooks. And I think I've played chapter 3 4 times now. And I've still not quite grasped what he's trying to say, because when you've got it in front of you on paper, you can kind of almost mentally underline it. I mean, sometimes I do, actually. I know people will disapprove of this, but I do sometimes actually underline it. And that, I just find that really hard to do when somebody's reading it to you. So I love an audiobook as a fiction rather than
they have to do the different voices well, though, don't they? In the fiction.
They do. They do.
You have to have a bit of an actor doing it.
You do. That's right. Yeah.
Good.
Well,
so approval of audiobooks all round. but
light approval.
consumptions.
Light approval.
Yeah.
Let's not replace real books.
Absolutely.
No.
And I don't like a Kindle at all.
No, I think we all agree Kindle is terrible.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That might be the most controversial thing we've ever said on this podcast. We're going to get letters of complaint.
Okay.
I assure you, everything is political now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
So we'll put our contact details in the show notes so that people can complain to us and say, oh gosh, I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah.
Sebastian, anything from you?
Not really.
No?
Thanks for coming,
Okay.
Dickie. Being our
it's
first
been fantastic.
guest in the studio.
So great to see the office. It's brilliant. It's just near to Old Trafford, which I know is your
It's where my heart
your
is.
place of worship. And it's really great to be here. Thank you for having me. It's been excellent.
Thank you. So please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, like it, and tell all your friends about it. We'll put recommendations for the things we've talked about in the show notes, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.